Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Dr. Terry Gordon. And he's here today to share with us his new book, No Storm Lasts Forever, Transforming Suffering into Insight. Now, Dr. Gordon is a Cleveland Clinic trained cardiologist who practiced within mainstream medicine for over 2 decades. Named the American Heart Association's National Physician of the Year in 2002, Dr. Gordon is nationally recognized in the matters of the heart. As a motivational speaker, he has shared the stage with Wayne Dyer, and as a musician, he is the co-host of the Doctors Who Rock, a United Way event. He spearheaded a national campaign called the Joshua Miller Hearts Act, which will place automated external defibrillators, otherwise known as AEDs, in every school in the country, protecting from sudden cardiac arrest our most precious resource, our children. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Terry Gordon.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here. And my goodness, I know your book has been around for a while, but it was new to me, and I love it. Oh my goodness, I couldn't put it down once I started reading.
Thank you. Yeah, it came through me, not from me, definitely.
Well, and for our listeners that are new to your story and new to you, what made you decide it was time now to write this book when you went ahead and published it?
Well, people started crossing my path, and little did I know it was purposeful. One of those people that crossed my path was Wayne Dyer. And I actually had a patient who introduced me to Wayne Dyer. And this patient, his name was Art Blair. And I walked into his room one morning. He was a new patient. And the first thing out of his mouth was, "Whoa, Dr. Gordon, you're killing yourself." And I said, I beg your pardon? He said, "You're killing yourself. You've got this marvelous energy around you, but it's all fractured. And you really better do something about it, or something very bad is going to happen to you." And I kind of responded, "Mr. Blair, I'm the doctor. I'm here to take care of you, not the other way around." And he said, "Well, all I'm telling you is what I'm seeing. And I see something very bad in your future unless you make some significant changes." So he had atrial fibrillation. And I treated it, and he ultimately went home. He came back, and the first thing out of his mouth when I walked in his room the second time he was hospitalized was the same thing. You haven't done it yet, have you? And I said, "Art, I don't have time. I'm so busy. I'm like a mouse on a wheel. I just have to keep going faster and faster and faster to keep from falling." And he said, "Well, let me just throw a couple of suggestions out." And he suggested that I learn how to meditate. And I had dabbled with meditation back in the 60s when I was in college, but I didn't need it. I'm in control. And the other thing he suggested were 2 books by Dr. Wayne Dyer. One of them was Real Magic, and the other was called Inspiration, Living in Spirit. And I was so taken by them, I tried to call Wayne Dyer and got in touch with his secretary. She answered the phone. I said, "This is Dr. Gordon. I'd like to speak with Dr. Dyer, please." Well, she could have cared less. Never got to talk to him. So about 2 or 3 years later, my wife Angela and I took our first trip to Hawaii. And right before we left for Hawaii, she developed shingles. So she was so sick. We got out to Hawaii. I'm not sure how we got out there because she was so sick. And, the first 3 or 4 days, she's in bed basically, and I'm walking the beach trying to, enjoy myself. And one morning I came back kind of kicking the sand, feeling sorry for myself. And guess who I bumped into on the beach? Wayne Dyer.
No way.
Now that doesn't just happen. Now, and don't misinterpret. I'm not special. This can happen to everybody. But that sort of synchronicity is not just happenstance. It doesn't just happen. So I walked up to him, and I said, "Man, I know you're on vacation, and I don't want to bother you. I just want to thank you for saving my life." And he said, "Really? Tell me about it." So for the next 20 minutes, I was the most important person in the world to Wayne Dyer. And at the end of our conversation, he invited me to come back over to his motel, and spend some time with him. And we did. He had just had an angioplasty and stent, so we had something to talk about. I'm a cardiologist. And so, we developed this friendship, and he ultimately invited me out to Maui for his Maui retreat and asked me to get up and speak for about an hour during that thing. And, we just clicked. And we were actually supposed to take a cruise, his family and our family, the middle of July in the year 2009. Little did I know that this not-so-chance meeting was purposeful, because he set me out on a course of discovery that allowed me then to handle what was yet to come. And that happened in June of 2009. It was the 30th, and I was up in my office doing a little reading, and my daughter, Maddie, had just come in from Chicago, where she was teaching in an inner city school. And, it's a parent's sixth sense when you can just tell something's not quite right. And she just had this heaviness dripping from her. And I said, "What's up, sweetie?" And she came around my desk and plopped down in front of me, put her arms up on my knees, and she said, "Dad, I always thought that the older I got, the more control I assumed over my life, the easier life would become." And then with a deep sigh and a single tear trickling down her cheek, she said, "It's just not happening that way." And I pulled her up into my arms and started to rock her as I had for 27 some odd years, and thought for a very long time, because I knew what I was about to say would be very important to her. And I said, "Darling, I think that's the way it's supposed to be. That if we are to grow, if we are to mature, if we are to progress on this spiritual path toward enlightenment, we must face greater and greater obstacles, because it's only by overcoming those obstacles that we can achieve that sort of enlightenment." And I shared with her that everything's in perfect order. Even what you're going through right now is in perfect order. And I ended it, I kissed her on the forehead after telling her a quote from the Kabbalah, which is the ancient mystical text of Judaism. And ended it says, "It's the falls of our life that provide us the energy to propel us onto a higher path. It's the falls of our lives, not the cushy life." And as I kissed her on the forehead, I left her with one final thought when I said, "Honey, we really ought to be grateful for the crap that comes our way." And I left her with that thought. The next morning, Marianne, the telephone rang in our home, and the grave voice on the other end of the line shared with me that our son Tyler had been involved in a car accident, that he had flipped his car head over heels and shattered his neck. And then came the dreaded words, "Your son's quadriplegic." Well, hopefully you've never had to experience that sort of a phone call. We dread, as our children are being raised, growing up, we dread, that call. They may not come home in time or in a condition we're particularly proud of, but you just can't imagine the impact of those words, "Your son is quadriplegic." Well, I had about 20 seconds of denial. And then the doctor in me kicked in. I knew exactly where we were going, what was going to happen, and what we were going to be facing. And within an hour of that telephone call, I hastily packed a bag, speeding down up the interstate, trying to get on an overbooked plane in Cleveland that would get me to Denver, Colorado. They were getting ready to life flight Tyler from Durango to Denver, and I was trying my best to get there in time. When I got there, there were 8 people ahead of me on this overbooked flight, and somehow I got a seat. It was a window seat. And now I'm like a caged cat. I'm incommunicado for 3 hours, the worst 3 hours of my life. It just, the chaos in my mind, it felt like I was in a tornado, and it was loud, and it was whooshing, and it was dark, and it dank, and I looked down in the funnel of this tornado, and it was just pure blackness. It was so frightening. And I kept saying to myself, "I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't." And I can't tell you for sure that I heard the voice of God, but definitely the words from God from deep within entered me when God said, "Yes, you can." I said, "No, I don't have the tools to do this." And God reminded me, "Terry, just last night, you shared your wisdom with your daughter, Maddie. You can talk the talk, but now you're going to have to live it." And I said, "But I don't have the tools. Help me do this. How can I do this?" And God reminded me that everything's in perfect order. Just as I had shared with Maddie, everything's in perfect order. Even this is in perfect order. And then God shared with me one of the most profound thoughts I've ever had in my life, one I had never contemplated before, when God said, "Treat this as if it was something you had chosen." Now, why would I do that? Why would I choose a tragedy such as this? what possible good could come from such a life-altering calamity? What lessons could be hidden within such turmoil? But, there are many who believe that we actually choose what it is we are to experience in a particular lifetime. And that choice is based on what our spiritual development requires in order to continue on its progressive course. So as I began navigating the storm in our lives, the challenge for me, quite frankly, became adjusting my perception of these events enough to recognize the presence of God within the experience. And in order to do that, I had to look way, way, way beyond what I had previously judged as good or bad. I came to appreciate that adversity is a gift from the divine. It may not come enveloped in the most beautifully wrapped paper package you could imagine, but in fact, it could be so disgustingly hideous that it's nearly impossible to comprehend how it could ever be of benefit. But I've come to appreciate, Marianne, that this realm, this human realm in which we live, is the perfect circumstance in which we can approach what I think we all are seeking, and that's insight. But look, crap happens, and none of us are immune to the pain and turmoil of this existence. But life's balanced, not only with those things that cause us to suffer, it's beautifully coupled with those things that provide us pleasure as well. And because of that, we're not overly burdened with the negative aspect of these experiences. The question then becomes, are there really such things as negative experiences? And I've come to a place, Marianne, where I don't think so. I don't think there's any such thing as a negative experience, because it can actually be a blessing in disguise. They can become a catalyst for change, fodder for growth. So what we must do is we must free ourselves of the attachment to what we think of as good experiences, as well as the aversion to the negative ones. Because in truth, they're one and the same. There's no duality. They're really, one and the same. We have to maintain that equilibrium in our lives. The monsoon countered by a calm, sunny day. Perfect health balanced by life-threatening disease. Darkness by illumination. These perceived opposites, in truth, are conjoined to one another. You can't have darkness unless you've experienced light. Lao Tzu, I don't know if you've ever read the Tao Te Ching. In fact, Wayne wrote a beautiful book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, about the Tao Te Ching. It's a marvelous book. But Lao Tzu, in the second verse, and I quote, "Under heaven all can see beauty as beauty only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good only because there is evil." So as life started anew with us, as we were experiencing in Denver, the first 4 or 5 days were just horrific. I mean, Tyler almost died 2 or 3 times. And they had us in a Ronald McDonald-like house, juxtaposed to the hospital. And I remember one morning awakening, and there was a small crack in the curtains. And the sun was streaming through this small crack and projecting orbs, prisms all over the walls, and they were beautiful. And I opened my eyes to these orbs dancing everywhere, and I remember thanking God for this beautiful day. Thank you. And then suddenly I realized where I was and what we were doing here. And then I felt so guilty because I had actually enjoyed something when my son couldn't. And I saw beauty when my wife couldn't see beauty. And I felt so guilty. And then it hit me. Why shouldn't I enjoy the beautiful day? It's there. It's like a little puppy dog that's sitting right next to you. Why shouldn't I enjoy that? And I realized that in order for me to remain healthy, in order for me to help my son, I can't be in the quagmire. I can't be weighted down by the negative emotions that I was feeling, that we all were feeling. And it taught me a very powerful lesson about health and how to go through circumstances like this. But, we have a choice. And the choice is you can resist the gift, become the victim, you can suffer, or you can choose to accept the gift and learn everything there is that gift has to offer. And what I've come to, Marianne, quite frankly, is that God has chosen Tyler's injury as a blessing for the rest of us. He's helped a lot of people. He's helped me. I've seen him grow in ways I never imagined he could. He has seen himself grow in ways he couldn't have imagined. But it's been quite a journey. And again, I became cognizant of those people who crossed my path, and Wayne Dyer, God love him, helped me more than any other one person in my life, and continues to.
Yeah, his book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, was one of my favorites as well. And it really did shift perspectives for me early on when I was starting my own journey. You know, one of the things that I've been, as we listen to your story and everything that happened, were there ever times that, while we understand that the souls are here to experience what they're here to experience, and it's, for best and highest good, were there ever times where you felt like, gosh, I'm just really having a tough time accepting this or moving through this?
Absolutely. And early on, it was so difficult to talk to anybody about it. But as things, when we came home after 4 months of rehabilitation, it was just horrific. It was just horrific. And we were in the same boat, paddling differently. My wife and Tyler and I were living together. We still are. And it was just like we were paddling in different directions. And it was just so hectic. And so, yeah, there were many times when I questioned, why me? And I ultimately came to this place, well, why not me? If I can handle it, why not me? I deserve that gift. I deserve to become enlightened. Again, that doesn't happen without a cost. But what I came to appreciate is that in doing so and feeling that way and behaving that way, I'd never embraced, God gives you a cross if you're a Christian, or God gives you something too heavy for you to carry. I never embraced that until about a year into our experience. And my father died of prostate cancer, so I was always very vigilant with my PSA. Well, my PSA started climbing. And don't look a thing like my dad, really didn't think I had it. And my PSA, by the way, was still normal, but climbing. And the doctor asked me what I wanted to do. I said, I want a biopsy. And lo and behold, it came back positive. I remember the day when he called me, he said, Terry, I can't believe it, but it's positive. And I remember looking up in the sky, Miriam, thinking, okay, God, you're aware of what I'm going through down here, right? But if you think I can handle this, then I'll handle it. And apparently he said, okay, because there we went. And that was right in the middle of all this. So, for me to tell you, read this book and it's going to be an easy, no, it's not at all. It's something you have to endure. It's something you have to live through. But if you're cognizant, and Art Blair, going back to him, he implored me to do one thing, and that was to spiritualize everything every day. And I had never done that. I had the feeling I needed to, but I had never done that because I was so busy. I was so busy in my practice. And yet, if you do that, if you look for spirit in everything, and it's there, even in what's going on in today's world, it's there in everybody, every being. So it was something that I was prepared for. I didn't think I was, but I had been prepared for over a decade after meeting up with Wayne. And he was the one who actually suggested that I write the book. He was the one that suggested that I journal. I had never journaled before. I always thought the people who kept a journal just wanted it to be found. But again, I found that talking to people was very difficult. So I just started kind of writing down my thoughts. And they may not have been completed concepts, but then at some point I'd go back and reread it, and it would mean a little bit more. And I showed it, to a couple of my friends, and they said, you guys share this. And so Wayne wrote the foreword to my book, No Storm Lasts Forever. And that's how it came about being. And like I said, it's helped so many people, and I feel so good because Tyler's the one that's helping the people. It's not me. It's him. It's his struggles, and but in many respects, it's been a beautiful experience. It's been sad too. There are two selves in each of us. There's the physical self, which is planted in this material world. It's an ego encapsulated in skin, and then there is the spiritual self, which resides in a place of much higher consciousness. And I've been able through meditation to transcend from the material perspective to this perspective of higher awareness. The spiritual self is immortal. The material self is not. It is mortal. It's fragmented. It's fractured. It's temporary. It's changed irreversibly by disease and injury and even by our thoughts. So when I transcend to this place of higher awareness, let me back up. When I'm down in the material world, physical world, and I see Tyler, it's so painful. He's been in bed for two years now, and a decade of his life has been in bed. And when I allow myself to experience that, it's an ocean of suffering that I feel watching him do that. But when I transcend to this place of higher awareness, Marianne, it's a place of no judgment. It's a place of no expectation. It's just passive observation. And what I can see when I'm in this, I can see where Tyler's going when I'm in this place of higher awareness. Much like I can see where my wife is going with her path and my children. And the strangest thing is that from this place, I'm also able to see myself as I'm going through what we're going through in the physical plane. But from this place of non-judgment, no interference, just passive observation. And I think at some point what's going to happen is that I'm going to be in this place of higher awareness as I watch myself die, knowing that we are spiritual beings having just a temporary human experience. And from this place of higher awareness, I believe I'm going to be able to watch that transition as it occurs.
I don't doubt that at all. I mean, I think the human spirit's amazing and can do some remarkable things. And if you believe that's what's going to happen, I believe you.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, I have no way to prove it, but it's just this gut feeling that one has. And this whole process has been, for me, such a cleansing one, such a beautiful one. And people always raise an eyebrow when I say, this is a beautiful experience. They look at me like, you're crazy. But yet it is. When life is cushy and hunky-dory and everything's perfect, it's a lot of fun. But I don't think we grow very much when that's what we're doing. And, so when people tell me, Terry, you don't deserve this, you've helped so many people, you've saved lives of kids and all this, you don't deserve it. And as I said before, yeah, I do. I do deserve this enlightenment. And it makes it worthwhile. It makes it purposeful. Again, if you can find even a little bit of positivity or learn just a little something from an experience, it's no longer a negative experience. It's a positive experience. And that's kind of how we're going through this.
Do you really believe that we need to experience challenges in order to manifest like a spiritual awakening, like what you had?
I do. So often, it's, that happened. Ho-hum, too bad. Feel sorry for them. But you really have to experience it in order, I think, and that doesn't mean it's exclusive. Don't get me wrong, because there's nothing that is exclusive in any of this. But I do believe that in order to take that next step, that step to higher awareness, and there are lots of steps to get there, that you have to really experience it. You can't just hear about it. You can't just read about it. This book is not just about a kid with a spinal cord injury. It's about dealing with grief. It's about dealing with loss. It's about dealing with the fear of change. So, there are many ways that we can become enlightened. And don't get me wrong, reading about it, listening to people as they talk about it, they're all very important. But I really believe for that quantum leap, at least for me, that's the way it's been. I always thought, I need to tap into the spiritual stuff that I keep hearing about, but I'll do it later, after I retire. Well, I retired, and it was a year later that all this happened. And like I said, it was purposeful and placed in my path, and I've gotten to spend so much quality time with my son that I wouldn't have otherwise. So there are many, many blessings hidden in this seemingly quagmire.
As you were writing your book, in what ways did Wayne Dyer kind of influence not just your life, but your outlook altogether?
Well, that's a difficult question because he helped me in so many different ways. And we talked a little bit about that book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. That was a life changer for me. Going through, and I had to read it multiple times. And when I say multiple, I mean 15, 20 times I read that book because there were so many nuances in there. But again, he crossed my path at a time 10 years preceding Tyler's injury. And the impact of, it was just a game changer is all I can say. He impacted me, and he's the real deal. I mean, when you listen to him and if you know him, he's the same person. I mean, it was just a phenomenal friend and a brilliant mind. And I mean, gosh, he sold 30 or 35 New York Times best-selling books, and his PBS shows. He just touched so many different people, and I am forever indebted to him.
I would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the health advocacy that you've done. And I would love for you to share that with us, because when I found out about that, I was going through your website and reading everything. I was astounded, not only what you were putting into place, but just what wasn't available. And I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, we had a 15-year-old high school football player in our community, Josh Miller, who ran off the football field one Friday night, and he collapsed. And in front of his teammates, and in front of his friends, and sadly in front of his parents, he died. And Josh died of a cardiac arrest. Now, kids are not supposed to do that. I saw the video of his death, and I want to tell you, Marianne, it was one of the most sickening things I've ever seen in my life. It was like watching a movie that you had seen 1,000 times, and yet you were helpless to change the ultimate outcome. There was an ambulance on the other side of the football field. It took them about 2 minutes to get to him. When they got there, they pulled a defibrillator out of the ambulance, put it up on the gurney, turned around, and then started stabilizing his neck, thinking that he had had a neck injury. And about 7 minutes later, an EMS unit arrived. They realized he was in full cardiac arrest, got a defibrillator out, and started shocking him. And sadly, that was too long of a delay, and he died. In that normally boisterous stadium, you could hear a pin drop, except for the wail of his mother. And that sound continues to reverberate through my soul. I was then president of the local chapter of the American Heart Association, and I vowed that wasn't going to happen again. So we set about a project to raise almost $300,000 to put AEDs in every junior high school and high school in our community. We became the first county of its size in the nation to do so. And once we completed that, I thought, well, gosh, what about the next county or the next county? And I joined a group of parents who'd lost their children to sudden cardiac arrest. It was called Parent Heart Watch. And one of the fathers, John Akampora, and I went up on the hill to try to lobby for this. Well, never done that before. Knew that you probably would need some sort of an introduction. And it became very clear quickly that unless we were one of their constituents, they didn't want to talk to us. So on the way home, I was meditating, and I was praying to God. I said, look, I've got all this energy. Show me what I'm supposed to do. And boom, it flashed into my head. And what came into my vision was this. There was a man in town that I knew. His name was Dave Brennan. I didn't know anything about him other than he wore a white cowboy hat. And I was supposed to approach him, so I called him that night, told him who I was, and asked if I might come to talk to him. He said, yeah, come on over tomorrow morning. So I went over the following morning on my way to work, and I had this little booklet with pictures of some of the kids that had crossed over. I was telling the story of each of them, and he's very respectfully, about halfway through it, leaned forward, closed the booklet on my hand, and said, Terry, I've been following you in the news. I know what you're up to. Cut to the chase. What do you need? I took a deep breath, and I said, well, Mr. Brennan, I need $5 million. He said, okay, what are you going to do with that? And I said, that would put an AED in every single school in our state, K through 12, public, private, parochial, charter. We could train 5 people in CPR and the use of the AEDs in every single school, align them with the local paramedics and the 911 service, so that when a frantic call comes in that someone's had a cardiac arrest, the person on the operator will say, turn around, there's an AED, a defibrillator right behind you. So he sat back and he kind of thought for a second. He said, okay, this is how it's going to happen. And it was exactly what I saw in my vision. And we ultimately succeeded in getting the $5 million. It was in $2.5 million increments. And we became the first state in the country to do this. On the day that we finished that initiative, I was in Columbus, Ohio, the state capital, and I received a phone call from Betty Sutton, who was our congresswoman, U.S. congresswoman, and she said, do you think we could do this on a national level? And I said, no, ma'am, I don't think so. And she said, oh, why not? And I said, because I know we can. And I wasn't being cocky. Wayne also wrote a book called The Power of Intention, and that's what I was practicing. I just didn't know what it was called. And what I mean by that is I already see that initiative as being complete. So within 6 months, Betty Sutton had grabbed the baton from me and bolted. She had it passed through the U.S. House of Representatives unanimously, and it got blocked, or I shouldn't say it got blocked. Senator Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, was ill. He was the head of the Help Committee, and the bill died before they were able to take a look at it. So she brought it up again the following year. Once again, with unanimity, had the bill passed. This time, it was blocked by one person. And the way the U.S. Senate works is one person can block a bill from leaving the committee. That one person happened to be a physician. His name was Tom Coburn. And he wasn't against the bill. His line in the sand was fiscal responsibility. We did not have any money attached to it. So it would be requesting new funds. So it's going to happen. It just has taken longer than what I thought it was going to. But when the milieu is right in the Senate and in Congress, then we're going to put that bill back up again. The terrible thing, the travesty, is that since the bill first passed U.S. House of Representatives, over 300 children have died in schools as a result of a cardiac arrest. But if you have ever walked through Congress, through all the buildings, all the office buildings, guess what are hanging everywhere? AEDs. So our Congress is protected, but our children are not. And we've got to protect our most precious resource, our children.
Without a doubt. Thank you for all the work that you're doing on that, because it does take somebody to spearhead these movements to make change. But the encouraging thing is, you're one person, and look at everything you were able to do. And yes, people joined you along the way, but look at everything you were able to do.
Well, that's all Wayne Dyer's fault. So he taught me to be that way.
I think you have your own gumption with that too. So.
Well, I don't take no for. When I first came up with this idea for the school, I went to the foundation of our hospital, and I needed at that point $200,000. And no, actually, it was 100. We found 100, but I needed another $100,000. And I went to the foundation. And the guy said, "Oh, this is a great idea. We'll give you $1,000 for each for the next 3 years." I walked out of his office and walked straight over to the CEO of the hospital and went into his office. And within 3 minutes, he said, "You know what? We'll give you the $100,000." The guy from the foundation wasn't real happy with that because it just took me an extra 5 minutes to walk across the street and convince him of the beauty of this. And we had a number of really neat say. One of the most favorite one of them. There are lots of them. There was this elementary school, and the principal decided he was not going to accept a free AED, free training. And his reason was, these were elementary schools. They don't have cardiac arrest. Well, actually, they do, not very often, but they do. So one of the family members, she was a nurse, kind of twisted his arm to get the AED. So he reluctantly got the AED. About 2 months later, all 350 of the elementary school students were in the auditorium anxiously awaiting the arrival of Santa Claus, who jumps up on the stage and has a cardiac arrest in front of all these kids.
Oh,
and
wow.
Saved by the AED that the principal didn't want.
Oh, my goodness.
You couldn't concoct a better story than that.
Yeah, I mean, and look at all the children that were able to learn about the importance of that as well by being present when that happened, even though that's not typically something you'd want kids to see.
Right, but in front of everybody, they shocked him, and he woke up. He was awake before he left the auditorium.
Oh, wow.
We had another child that was saved the day after their free AED arrived. So there were lots of really neat stories, and we've had a lot of saves.
Well, thank you for all the work you're doing with that. Where can people connect with you, Terry, and learn about your book and the work that you do, and just learn more about you and be part of your community?
Well, thank you. Yeah. My website is Dr. Terry Gordon. It's Dr. with no period. Terry is Terry, Gordon, GORDON.com. And you can purchase the books there. I've got the No Storm Lasts Forever that's coming out as an audio here pretty soon. And then I have another book that's in the process of getting out there. It's called No Beginning, No End. A cardiologist discovers there's no such thing as death. So
ooh, I love that.
Yeah. I had do I have a moment or two just to share this with you?
Of course, yes.
Okay. I've seen thousands of people die. Usually I'm the one frantically trying to keep them from doing so. I had this one patient. Her name was Audrey. And she was from the South. I'm from the South. She was from North Carolina, actually. And, we always had that bond. And she had a very sick heart. I implanted one of the original defibrillators, the implantable defibrillator in her, expecting her to live maybe 2 years. A decade later, she shows up in the emergency room, and her defibrillator is shocking her repetitively. And despite my efforts, I just couldn't get her very sick heart to calm down. And, it was like every 15, 20 minutes she was going into a cardiac arrest. Well, around 4 o'clock that afternoon, she asked the nurse to see if I was available to come talk to her. So I came right over and sat down on her bed. She said, Terry, I'm not afraid to die. I've been actually dying for a decade. And I said, oh, no, Audrey, you've been living for a decade. She said, no, you don't understand. I've been preparing for my death for a decade. And I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to do it. I don't want to keep living the way I'm living now. Will you turn the device off? And I said, I will, but you understand that the next time you have this heart rhythm disturbance, you're going to cross over. She said, I understand. So I turned the device off and shared with her how honored I'd been, not only to be her doctor, but her friend. And I turned to walk away, and she said, Terry, I've just got one other request. Will you hold my hand? And I said, well, Audrey, of course I will. So I came back in her room, invited the nurse out of the room, sat down on her bed, and held her hand. And we're just talking about the South, and it was just a beautiful little conversation. And her monitor was over her right shoulder, so I could see the moment she went into a cardiac arrest, and her eyes just very very gently closed and fluttered as she passed on. And as she did so, I could feel her energy swirling around me, and then poof, it was gone. And I looked back at her hand, and I'd just been holding that hand. It was the same hand I'd been holding. Had the same electrolytes in it, the same bony structure, the same blood. Everything in that hand was the same except for one thing. The spirit had left the vessel. And that's when I felt it. And then I looked back at the hand, and the strangest thought crossed my mind. You remember the movie E.T.?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There was a scene in there when I think E.T. was trying to show off to the little boy, as I recall. And his bony finger leaned over and touched this flower, and ding, the flower withered. And then E.T. touched the flower again, and ding, the flower came back to life. And it hit me. God had just dinged Audrey. Now, we think we know so much in science. We don't know squat. What we do know is that energy doesn't die. It transforms, it changes, it goes someplace. Depending upon your religious beliefs, it might be heaven, nirvana, the universe, but that energy is always there, forever, for eternity. Much like I believe that energy exists before we're dinged into this body for eternity. So if you buy that, eternity one way, eternity the other way, the time in between, which is the time that we're here, is infinitesimal. Not insignificant, not inconsequential, but infinitesimal. And it changed my whole outlook on everything I'd been doing for 25 years. Because, when there's a code blue, we go flying into the room and we do our thing. And if the patient makes it, we take them over to the coronary care unit. If they don't, they go to the morgue. I never once thought about, during that, what was really happening. And it gave me the opportunity for the tail end of my career to really begin experiencing that. That didn't happen every time, and I didn't do it every time. But I was aware. I was cognizant. And that's part of that reaching higher awareness and consciousness. And that's what took me on this journey of talking about the biggest fear of everyone, and that's our demise. And I know that I'm comforted in knowing that, when I kick the bucket, I may not be in the same form or in the same play, but that energy is going to be there. For me to participate in, for it to participate in me.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. That's, it's interesting because that is the part of us that is never ending. And so I think it provides a lot of people some peace in their heart. If maybe making that transition something that's very scary for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and for most people, that's one of the things that I marveled at. I mean, there were several people that I was just so surprised at how they handled their dying. One of them was a nun, very angry. One of them was a minister, very angry. And yet there were other people who gave me a template of how I want to die. There was one of the founders of my medical school, and I was a second-year medical student, and there was a code blue in the ICU, and it turned out to be him. I went running in there just to, they weren't going to let me do anything, but just to watch and observe what was going on. And this doctor who was dying was barking out orders. His last words were, "Damn it, doctor, I told you to give me more bicarb." And then he died.
Oh,
and
wow.
I thought, gosh, that's not how I want to die. And I had another patient who had as sick a heart as Audrey's, who one day just kept having cardiac arrest. It was like 17 or 18 times we had to rush down. By the time we'd get there, the nursing staff would have gotten the defibrillator and used it on him and shocked him back. And at one point, after the 18th or 19th time, I came running into his room breathless because I was all the way up at the top floor. And he asked me how my day was going. Here's a guy dying, and he's asking me how my day is. And his head's down in reverse Trendelenburg, getting, as much blood as possible to his brain. And I shared with him, there's not much else I can do to help you. I'll do whatever you want. You want me to keep doing this? I'll do it. but and he very calmly looked over at his wife, who was at the head of the bed. They were holding hands, and he said, "Well, hon, what do you think we should do?" It was like they were trying to decide which movie to go see that night. It was very peaceful, and that's how I want to die. I want to die at peace, regardless of the circumstance or what's happening. And I think that's part of what I've learned through the writing of this book. It's powerful.
That is powerful. And yeah, it makes such a big difference. You look at the doctor that passed that's barking out orders. I can only imagine how that doctor's feeling, with, that having happened that way. That must have been just awful.
Well, he had that kind of a personality. A lot of us were, kind of fearful of him,
Mm-hmm.
But he died angry, and I happen to embrace, as do a number of religions, that if your last thought here is your first thought in the next place that you're going to end up, and so better to make it a peaceful transition than a tumultuous one.
Yeah, without a doubt.
That's what this book is about.
Well, Terry, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today and to share not only your book, but your insights. I mean, it's been such an honor to spend this time with you.
Well, it's been mine, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Again, if you'd like to connect with Dr. Terry Gordon, you can at his website, drterrygordon.com, and that's DRTERRY Gordon.com for more information. No Storm Lasts Forever is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just what moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Friday and Saturday at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.